to another episode of MassieMessages. Today we have three distinguished guests that are going to talk about policing from the perspective of African Americans. All these guests are retired police officers. They're going to talk about policing when they were police. They're going to talk about current policing. And hopefully at the conclusion of this episode, we will all learn something that will be useful for our communities. Michael Massey II is going to take over this session today, and I'm just going to lead with having them introduce themselves and the number of years that they have in law enforcement, and then he'll begin his questions. All right, Ms. Brown.
Hello, I'm Rosetta Brown. I was born here in the city of Portsmouth. I'm a graduate of IC Norcom High School and a graduate of Norfolk State University. I graduated from Norfolk State University in 1975 with a bachelor's degree in political science education with intending going into teaching social studies. At that time, they were not hiring social studies teachers in this area, so I took the police exam just to see if I could pass the exam, and I did. So I joined the police department in October 1975, and I went on the street in 1976. While in the police department, I was a uniform patrol. I was in investigations. I was a sex crimes investigator, and I was also in the training division. I was the first African-American female field training officer, first African-American female sergeant, and the first African-American female lieutenant. When I left the police department after 22 years, I was the director of training. From there, I took 2 weeks retirement and went to the victim witness program in the Portsmouth Commonwealth Attorney's Office. And I stayed there for 21 years, retiring after 21 years.
Very good. Outstanding.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Jervis A. Brown. They call me GA. I came on the Portsmouth Police Department in October of 1972. During my tenure with the Portsmouth Police Department, I served in uniform patrol, homicide and robbery. I was the first black K-9 officer in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I was a spokesperson for the police department for approximately 10 years. During my last year of employment with the Portsmouth Police Department, I served as a supervisor on the street. After my retirement, I did approximately 1 year of law enforcement with the Norfolk Airport Authority, and then I returned back to Portsmouth with the Portsmouth Sheriff's Office as a local probation officer for 19 years.
Great. Mr. Mills?
Hello, my name is Willie Mills. They call me Nose. I was in the Portsmouth Police Department for approximately 32 years and retired from that department. After that, I joined the Virginia Port Authority Police Department. Stayed there for 8 years and retired from there also. Altogether, that was 40 years of law enforcement, continuous services. During my tenure in law enforcement, I was heavily involved in training, training young police officers, whether it be female or male, training period. That was a big part of my interest in law enforcement. I had, when I retired, I retired as a sergeant, and I was charged with dealing with handling one of the ports here in the Tidewater area.
All right, thank you very much. So we're going to start with a few questions and get a conversation going.
Yeah, for sure. First and foremost, I would just like to congratulate you all on all of your accomplishments in law enforcement. And I would just like to say I appreciate your years of service. And, just to start off, to get general context, could you guys all speak to, and anyone can start, to your experience specifically as a black police officer in your selective police department?
Well, when I joined the department, there were 2 female officers on the police department, 1 black and 1 white. And when I came out of the police academy, 5 female officers were hired at the same time. There was 3 black females and 2 white females. And we all went to uniform patrol. I can remember going into uniform patrol as a black female. As I said, there was only 1 other black female at the time. And we were assigned to field training officers. And I believe I was assigned to one of the most difficult field training officers because I was one of the few people on the police department at the time that had a college degree.
Oh wow.
And we were subject to subtle forms of racism, a lot of sexism.
Mm-hmm.
I was told that certain police officers would not ride with a female officer because their wives didn't want them riding with the female officers. And also, a lot as far as sexual harassment,
Mm-hmm.
there was blatant sexual harassment, but at that time there was nobody to turn to, no one to talk to about it, because you just like had to grin and bear it.
Mm-hmm.
I was also told the only place for a female is in the bedroom and then in the kitchen. And that was just day to day, because you came there to do your job,
Right.
and that's what I did. I did my job. And over the years, I found out while going into a lot of training, I was either the only female in training or I was the only black in the training.
Right.
So I knew I was going to be kind of singled out. Everybody was going to notice me because it was just one of me.
Right.
So I determined at that time that since I was there and I was going to be noticed, so I may as well be one of the best that was there. So I made it my business to always be at the top of the class in the training. And I also knew that as a female, everybody's going to look at you when you go on a call. You got to assert yourself, because when you go on a call, respond to citizens' complaints, they are going to address the male officer, even though you may have seniority. So I had to take it upon myself to exert myself and take charge of the situation. And I always knew that someone was watching me because I'm a black
Right.
and then I'm a female. So when I became a sergeant, I always knew that I was going to be watched. And I always knew that I had to be aware of that at all times.
Definitely.
I had to do my job and do it right. And there are a lot of times there were things you wanted to say, but in the back of your mind, you knowing, well, I need this job.
Mm-hmm.
I got to do my job and I got to go home tonight.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just how it was. And as far as sexual harassment, that phrase hadn't even been coined when I joined the police department. It was just day to day, and you did your job and you went home.
For instance, going through some things, I often think about when I was in training with a senior officer. It would be 4 degrees outside, and he would roll all the windows down, turn the air conditioning on, and go on the interstate about 90 miles an hour, and tell me not to touch the radio because a rookie couldn't. I politely just asked him to take me back to police headquarters so I can get another person to ride with. The polite way,
Yeah.
you know. And that happened on 3 or 4 different occasions.
Wow.
But I wouldn't stand for it. I always spoke up for it. And knowing when to speak
Mm-hmm.
and keep your mouth closed is very important.
Interesting.
When I came on the police department, it was basically kind of close to integration. And I had never experienced anything because as far as employment, because I was a letter carrier, and prior to that I was in the military. I had not really worked with a group of whites. So this was somewhat of a eye-opener for me, because I did not realize, I knew that I would have to deal with arresting white citizens on the street, but I did not understand or expect the discrimination within where I was employed.
Right.
And that I knew that, as my wife had said, that I had to exceed beyond those individuals that I was working with, had to be a standout. If I did it, I had to do it right, where it would be noticeable, where it would be set an example for others to follow, not just minorities, but white officers as well. When I came on the police department, I believe there were about approximately 12 blacks on the police department, no females at all when I came on. So, you know, and we were spread out. You probably would not see another black officer until you went back out into the community. So, I mean, those were, to me, were trying times, but I had always put myself in a position, especially when it came to the things about jokes, the racial jokes. I'd always say, if somebody said, gee, I got this joke for you, my first question would be, is it a racial joke?
Right.
And if they say yes, I said, well, you need to keep it to yourself. I didn't tell them, and I didn't listen to them. I recall one time where it almost escalated to physical violence against the police chief's brother because the individual totally disregarded me by asking me the question. I responded, if it's racial, don't tell it. He told it, thought it was funny, and I told him to tell it again so I could get the punchline, so I could get my punch in.
Most of the time it seemed like once it was known how you stood, you weren't approached with
Right.
those things.
Okay.
But you had to set your grounds
Right.
first, you know.
The point you made about not seeing as many black officers in the department until you go out into our community. That leads me to my next question about how law enforcement should mirror its communities, or that theory behind it. And so, can you guys speak to your experience about being a black officer in your community?
I'll start by saying this. In the late 60s and early 70s, Don Brown, who's a rest in peace, is not here anymore. He used to be a police officer, and he was in charge of the crime prevention, the community relations unit in the police department, and that's how I got involved. And I liked the way that the guys and the girls lived and what they did, and that's one of the reasons I joined the police department, because of that community relations.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons.
That's awesome.
Well, I experienced one thing that I can say, coming from Portsmouth being a small city, when I went on the street, citizens were really surprised to see a black female anyway. Like I said before, I had to assert myself and know what I was talking about. But one good thing about being in Portsmouth is, as small as it is, if you're in the black community, somebody knows you or your mama or your dad or your granddaddy or you Bubble Bates' daughter.
Right.
So I had to be on my P's and Q's, because
Sure.
even if whatever I did, somebody was going to talk about it anyway and was going to get back to other people in the community.
Right.
And I got a little bit, I got some respect from people in the black community. Of course, you're going to have your knuckleheads that were saying, what are you doing down there? You shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that. And at the time I joined the police department, there was this television show called Christy Love. And Christy Love was a black female police officer that knew everything. She was a super cop. And I got so many things, people telling me, who are you, Christy Love? You Christy Love. I hated that show. And I mean, I got that from the black community. But one thing about being a black officer in the community, especially with your seniors, they're a little more calm, but because they can relate to you. And because I grew up in Portsmouth, I knew the neighborhoods, and I wasn't afraid to go to any place in the black community, because I'm black and I'm from Portsmouth, and I didn't have qualms going into projects or anything like that, because that's where I live, and these were my people.
Right.
And it was one of those things whereby, especially in black neighborhoods, there was an expectation for you to be disrespectful. That was an expectation of the general public. But you had to always set yourself up to be respectful of the individual that you were dealing with.
Okay.
Try to treat the individual with respect.
Right.
I'd always say, I can always escalate. And let me start down here first. Let me show you, give me an opportunity to respect you. I can get to the point to disrespect you,
Right.
but I want to start off trying to respect you as an individual. And I'm not going to set my job aside, but I'm going to try to be diligent and show you respect. Now, whether you accept it or not, that's entirely up to you.
Right.
The fact of calling an individual, especially young black males, you say sir, call them, I'm not a sir. I was brought up, that's a sign of respect. Has nothing to do with your age. While I'm dealing with you, you're a sir, you're a Muslim, you're a miss. If we're in a different environment where it's not work related, we can be on a first name basis. But as long as I'm dealing with you in the capacity as a law enforcement officer, I'm going to show you respect by putting a handle to your name.
Let me ask you this. That's an interesting point, because was that a part of police training, or is that something that you just did? Because what comes from that is your beginning encounter with a person can completely change simply by the way you decided, or your training decided, that this is how I'm going to approach this human being when I encounter them, no matter what the situation is.
Well, when you're in training, you're taught how to handle the call, how to do the job, but your home training taught you how to respect people. And if I respect you, more than likely, I'm hoping you're gonna return that respect. Because when I was in sex crimes as an investigator, I noticed that when I'm interviewing and interrogating someone, I would say, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. And they kind of looked shocked because I addressed them as sir.
Right.
But it just, like as he said, show respect. More than likely, you're gonna get it returned unless you come across a knucklehead.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've talked about training. I guess I've probably, in the state of Virginia, probably trained people in every department around here. But that reminds me of a situation I was in one time in a training class when an officer knew me, and he wanted me to teach him command presence. And my thing to him was, I cannot teach you command presence. You need to watch me, because he thought I had it.
Mm-hmm.
And matter of fact, I knew I had it. When I come up on the scene, the whole situation would change.
Right.
But it's not something that I could teach him.
Right.
Do your job, first of all. Listen to your training. Do your job. Command presence will come. And treat people like human beings.
Right. That's excellent.
I think that's awesome. So, what do you guys? How do you guys feel about community policing? And what does community policing mean to you?
My personal interpretation of it would be establishing an investment in the community. I mean, that's what you have to do. You have to be invested in the community. You have to become a part of it. You have to have those individuals living in that community know who you are and respect you. Yeah, be invested. I always say that I recall back when I first got on the police department, where the different neighborhoods, they were really invested in their community. Yeah, and I think we have lost a lot of that. I'm not sure whether it's because of desegregation or whatever the case may be, but I know like Cavalier Mine and different places of that nature, they were very invested in the quality in their community. Mm-hmm. If you went in and disrespected them, you found out about it. Yeah, right. You had to go in and be respectful. Mm-hmm. Whether you were black or white police officer, it was not something that they would tolerate for you to allow you to come in their community and be disrespectful. Mm-hmm. Something would be done about it from the administration, from the police department.
You know, we had a good community policing program when it first started. Matter of fact, I think you were in that. You were in training at the time when they was doing the training for the community policing. We had a good unit, and through the years it just petered out. I don't know what happened to it. I don't even know who's the neighborhood impact pack officer in my area now. I just don't used to know all that. But now programs change when personalities, when management changes. A lot of things change down the line, and that's one of the things that changed.
One thing I liked about community policing, the citizens knew who their police officers were, who worked that area, and when there was a problem, they called them. You know, they page them, call them cell phone, because everything is not an emergency.
Right.
Sometimes it's day-to-day living, quality of life, and they don't know who to call. Call your community police officer. If he can't help you, he can direct you to where you can go because you trust an officer and you will go to him, and that's what to me is community policing.
You're not going to get no information if you don't talk to people.
Right.
And I think
you can't do it.
And community policing was one of those things that started the concept was that we in law enforcement knew what your community needed.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't listen. When we started listening, we started learning. What ended up happening was we're trying to run people off the corner because this old lady is calling about the people on the corner and everything. We going over there from a law enforcement standpoint to run people off the corner. All the lady wanted was a light put on the corner. We didn't hear that.
Yeah.
We were telling you what you needed in the community as opposed to listening to what the community wanted. So, I mean, I think that's what community policing, the concept, listening and responding. Not everything is criminal.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those things are quality of life issues
Right.
that have to be addressed, which may lead to criminal activity.
Mm-hmm.
What they call the broken window theory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you leave the window broke, it's gonna, more things gonna start to happen.
Right.
Right.
And we started fixing things because we started listening to the community concerns.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm talking about, having an investment in that community.
So what can we as a community here in Portsmouth do to improve policing?
I think that we need to look at not just complaining, give some insight on what needs to be done. All of us can complain. I can complain about law enforcement, but what am I willing to do to assist law enforcement? Every time a crime comes up, especially when somebody gets killed, we got to stop doing this, and that's the only killing each other. But that's the only time we hear anything about stopping doing something when there's a tragedy. After the tragedy and the cameras go off, we do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
We need to get back and be invested in the community. I hate to say this, but when I was in homicide and robbery, I would beg to get a white-on-white crime because I knew I could solve it. Because I knew somebody in that neighborhood was waiting to tell me something.
Mm-hmm.
I hated getting a black-on-black crime because nobody's gonna give you any information, but there's an expectation of you to solve that problem.
But it was one chief that made police officers get out and talk to people. And a lot of information came from
Yeah.
him. But they stopped that. Certain police officers didn't like that. And they stopped it. Matter of fact, they got rid of the chief too.
Mm-hmm.
But they were made to go out and talk to people. And that's a very important aspect of
I think they call it reset, right? When they
Yeah.
call it reset.
Right. You have to do that. In order to get information, if this person knows, me as a police officer, know I'm all right, they can tell me about what's happening, what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
They want me in their community.
Right.
And that's a key. That's very important.
And that sounds like the circle, it sounds like you all have really gone. The answer to me that I hear from you all is the investment that if you're gonna improve policing, improve relationships, the police have to be willing to invest in the community, and the community has to be willing to invest in the police.
Correct.
And that means real investment. That means some level of communication, wherein there is open dialogue between, if I'm working this community, if I'm working Churchland, then I make a concerted effort to know the people in Churchland. That means I gotta get out of my car sometimes.
Oh yes.
And I gotta walk down the street and meet people and say hello to people at the appropriate times. And every community needs to be willing. The police need to do that, and the community needs to be open to getting to know the police officer. I used to always know our officer here, and now this is the first time that I don't know who our community police officer is, because he used to sit always in the little strip when you come to the neighborhood. But there's a disconnect now that I don't know how that happened and where is administration and what, but I know that I don't know who that person is. And I think that for us to improve things, we gotta get back. We gotta get back to that. Now let me ask you a question, Mills, because I know you did a lot of training. See, I'm taking on this segment. I know you did a lot of training with how to restrain people appropriately, so that you can get your job done, because you have to get the job done. But I imagine your training also involves the safety of yourself and the safety of
That's correct.
of the other person. So what do you see, what is going on right now when we keep getting these repeated cases which result in deaths? What is going on with policing right now that we keep seeing this cycle over and over?
Well, one thing I think the common denominator there is fear, for one thing. Fear causes a lot of things to happen. And I embarrass you. My command is to be mandate. When I say something, you should do that. If not, I am pissed off. We have to get out of that mentality of what I say goes, and don't embarrass me, but don't embarrass somebody else.
Right.
The thing about fear is it causes a reaction in people that a lot of times they know they don't have. They didn't know they had. But fear is awesome. And the way to combat fear is through cohesive training. You know, in training in defensive tactics, we are taught in law enforcement to protect yourself and the person also. You and the person. Protect everybody. So everybody can go home.
Right.
Because we know a lot of times it's just, it's over that quick.
Right.
And it's over something simple a lot of times. A lot of times, sometimes it's not, but most of the time it's over something simple.
Now I'm gonna put all of y'all on the spot because in my personal conversations with my friends, my final assessment was what you just said. That the overreaction that we see in policing as it relates to black and white issues is fear. People having a fear of us that we don't know precisely where it comes from, but there is a real fear as it relates to black men. And that causes people who are not black to react to us and react with us in a very different way. So, you know, how do we deal with that piece in policing today? You know, how do you, I know one of the things you said, which I think is excellent, is training, because I think that obviously you need to know first the things you are teaching, the proper techniques, but then how do we go to that next stage? How do we deal with the mindset of why are you afraid of people of color? How do we deal with that? And y'all, it may be y'all don't have an answer, maybe you have an idea.
Because you don't interact with individuals of other races. You know, I knew at one time there were individuals that came on the police department, didn't know anything about black people. But when they came on, there was an expectation because I got this badge on, you do as I say.
Yep, exactly.
And if I don't do as you say, then there was a different reaction where it became more aggressive from the white officer because he wasn't accustomed to dealing with blacks. Or wasn't accustomed to dealing with people in general.
But you know, a lot of times when you say, man, I thought you was so and so, you all right. That's because now I feel like I know you.
Right.
You talk to me.
Right.
I need to talk to you.
Exactly.
I know
Get to know you, and I don't fear you.
Right.
That's very important to me.
One thing
I think that's right.
I've noticed is that there's a lot of discussion about how to take a person into custody, the chokeholds and whatnot. I don't think there's a police department in this country that has it in writing that those holds are legal and they approved and sanctioned by the police department. Because every police department has policies and procedures. And once you go out and you take someone into custody by using excessive force and nothing is done to you for doing it, utilizing excessive force, then that's okay for you to keep doing it. One problem with the police department, they don't enforce their own policies. Because you get a white officer that goes out and gets in a physical confrontation with a black male and you use excessive force to get him into custody. When they get back to headquarters, that's okay because you brought them in. But the departments aren't even enforcing their own policies. And that's one of the big problems that I see.
You know, talking about that situation, any situation, we are taught about distance, and about putting yourself in that position. I learned something from G.A. Brown one time. He arrested a DUI, and the way he arrested him, I really liked his technique. He had to, can you remember that? He had the guy to put his hand as a test behind his back. If you do this, so, the guy put his hand behind his back, and he arrested him. But if he had confronted him face to face and said, "You want to arrest," it might have been a totally different situation.
Right.
But before you knew it, the guy was in handcuffs.
Right.
You know?
Communication.
Yeah. The distance, the law enforcement grasp when you first grab somebody, how to grab it, where to grab it, what you can do. If they move, you can feel it. You know, you need to know those things, and they'll taught them things.
And if
you
go,
need to listen.
And if you go back with the way you treat people, because there were numerous occasions that you would end up going on a call by yourself. You have to deal with a crowd of people, excuse me. And I recall one time where I was in a situation, I was the only police officer there to make an arrest. And it got to where we became involved physically. And somebody in the crowd said explicitly, "Him up." And then there was an explicit from another part of the crowd saying, "Ain't nobody with him." Because my understanding is because of the way I treated individuals when I dealt with them, there was someone in that crowd that I'd had contact with that knew that I was not the type of person to abuse somebody. Right. That I was only doing what I had to do to initiate, to make my arrest. And they would not allow somebody else in the crowd to become involved against me.
Right. And I think for our audience today, that if there's any message that we would want, especially these group of experts, they are speaking about serious community policing being engaged in the city, and proper training so that officers not only know how to physically encounter a person, but how to verbally communicate with that person as well, to de-escalate events. And then having people come in that talk about de-escalation ways of dealing with certain situations. That's what we're hearing from these experts. And we hope that our city is listening, because we want to bridge some gaps. This is not about creating more divide in Portsmouth. We are not interested in racial divide. We're interested in living in a harmonious city where people get along well, and where when the police encounter people, that the police are safe, and equally all the citizens are safe as well. And so we all got to do our part. Thank you for listening to another episode of MassieMessages. Thank you, Michael Massey, for leading this episode. Thank you, Mr. Mills, Ms. Brown, Mr. Brown. These two are married. They have a daughter who is in law enforcement also, in Homeland Security. These are some real experts that have some real expertise that they can offer the city, not just then, but currently, so we can make our police department one of the best in the country. So thanks again.
Also, training breeds confidence.
Oh yeah, indeed, indeed.